Dear listeners, welcome back to the History on Drugs podcast. My guest today is Stefan Snelders. He's a historian at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. He's well known in the world of drug history. He's published widely, including his recent Drug Smuggler Nation, Narcotics and the Netherlands 1920 to 1995. That came out with Manchester University Press in 2021. He's also written about the history of LSD in the Netherlands and some non-drug topics like the history of leprosy in colonial Suriname. Stefan is just a really interesting guy with an interesting life story. He's a native of Amsterdam. He got interested in drugs with everything really going on in Amsterdam during the 1980s when he was coming up. And he eventually learned a hell of a lot about everything that was going on with Amsterdam related to drugs, going back to the early 20th century through the explosion of the counterculture in the 1960s, the 1976 tolerance of cannabis that began in Amsterdam so famously, later movements related to ecstasy and LSD in the late 80s and early 90s, and in fact, it was that period that really inspired his first work on drugs, his dissertation on the history of LSD in the Netherlands, and then, of course, his later publications. Stefan's just a lovely guy, too. It's always fun to see him at the Alcohol and Drugs History Society conferences, and I had just seen him at a smaller conference at Radboud University nearby there, and I'm pretty sure it was Stefan who got me sick. If you're wondering why I sound terrible in this interview, it's because I'm sick, and Stefan got me sick. He was a couple days ahead of me, so he sounds much better than me. But I sounded pretty bad. I was right in the middle of it, but there was no choice but to do the interview. It's not so bad that you won't want to listen, but you're going to notice I don't sound right in this interview. But we recorded this at my little rental apartment in North Amsterdam. A really, really nice little spot there. A little echoey for an interview, but not too bad. And, you got to do what you can do when you're on the road. And we had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about Stefan's life and his background. And if you've got any interest in the history of drugs in the Netherlands and the pretty unique relationship between the Netherlands and these substances, then you're going to enjoy this interview a lot. So I hope you'll stay tuned. Before I turn to that, as always, please share this, like, subscribe, all that stuff, so that the word gets out and my guests get a proper hearing from a large audience. I'd really appreciate it. And I guess that's all I got for you. I don't have much to report. I'm just in Cincinnati, working hard, getting a lot of stuff done, doing a lot of writing. A lot of writing and reading, and it's really great. Really terrific. So that's all I got to say about that. Nothing else. So with that, here is my interview with Stefan Snelders.
I'm born in Amsterdam, and my father, actually, he's a historian himself, historian of science. Started as a chemist, but he became historian of science and professor at Utrecht University. Actually, the same department in which I'm working now myself, so that's a bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
But so I grew up in a house full of books and full of history books. So it got me onto history at a very early age. So it was very easy to decide that I would start studying history at the university when I finished secondary school.
When do you have to decide? I mean, so what are the schools like here? Do you have to pick a career early on, or can you just study? In the United States, you don't pick anything until you go to college.
No, it's just yet. In my days, at least, you had primary school and secondary school. So I went to the I did a part of the secondary school, which is the gymnasium, so with Latin and Greek and all the old stuff which you never will be using again the rest of your life. And then in those days, you could just pick your study. So it was all very easy, actually.
Yeah.
And then you start studying, and of course, you do a lot of other things than studying. But in the Netherlands, it's not like in the US that you have first to go to college and then to further education. It's just one.
Oh, really? There's no split between...
There's no split.
Huh.
So you do your bachelor there, and then you do your master there. And at university, I actually became very interested in the social history. Things like history from below, that kind of things. It was, of course, we're talking now about the 1980s, so these were kind of polarized times as well, although with hindsight we can now say
everything was great.
Everything was great. So part of the history study was more conservative people who wanted to go into diplomatic service, and they mostly chose for contemporary history. And social and economic history was more the domain of both Marxist approaches, but also interest in more the newer approaches like history of mentalities, the Anal school, stuff like that.
Right.
Away from eventmental, is that English? Event history.
Yeah.
So I thought it was quite nice, but actually at a certain point I also started to be a bit disillusioned with the whole history thing, because it was all there in its ivory tower, and especially at this Marxist-dominated department, they had a lot of left-wing discourses, but actually they never did anything to really change society. That was my view at the time. Of course, I was young and radical, of course. So afterwards, when I graduated and did my master's, I did it on a subject of social and economic history, on housing policies in Amsterdam. And a little bit further down the road, you have a so-called garden village, which was built to house the lower classes, which were not so adjusted to society. And I did actually my master thesis on the guy in the municipality who organized the building of these kind of garden villages.
What do you mean not so adapted to society?
Unemployed, alcoholic, voting communist.
All right.
I mean, your listener doesn't know perhaps, but we're sitting here in Amsterdam North in a place which used to be like also a place where communists and fascists would fight, stuff like this. Uh-huh. But also a big link with the history of drugs, but we'll get back to that later.
Sure.
After graduating,
What year did you graduate from college and then go to the master's? I don't know how old you are.
I'm 62.
Oh, holy shit, really?
I'm really 62.
You do not look 10 years older than me, but there you are.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't feel like that.
Okay.
So I graduated at the university in 1988, but then for over 5 years I dropped out. I did other stuff. I did a lot of martial arts. But at a certain point, I started to become interested again. Actually, I never lost interest in history as it is, only as an academic pursuit. But then I got involved in the, I must say, the psychedelic renaissance of that day, which was the MDMA house phenomenon. And at a certain moment, I talked to a guy who was at the Free University in Amsterdam, and he had actually got the money to do his PhD. So I thought, I was not really interested in academic pursuits, but I thought getting money for doing your PhD, that sounds interesting. So I had my contacts and a very influential figure in Dutch history called Willem Vrijhof agreed to become my promoter, my supervisor. He was professor at Erasmus at that time in Rotterdam, moved to the Free University, and he's one of the big shots in the Netherlands in the field of cultural and social history.
Okay.
Pre-modern times, early modern times, but he agreed to be my promoter in on the history of LSD in the Netherlands.
Huh.
Which sounded like a cool thing to do. I also had my co-supervisor. He was an American, Charlie Kaplan, who was actually a drug sociologist, a former colleague of Carlos Castaneda at Berkeley, of all people.
Yeah.
And he had become professor in addiction research in Rotterdam, and later he moved to Maastricht. And he became my co-supervisor, so it was really like a kind of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary setting. Unfortunately, however, it turned out that I could not get money.
Oh no! The whole plan is ruined.
Because the point was, if you drop out for a few years, and I don't know how it is in the United States, but in the Netherlands they start counting. So you can do your PhD with funding from the Dutch Research Council if you have started within like 3 years of your graduating your master's thesis.
Yeah.
And then every following step goes along those lines. And since I had not been involved for too many years, since then I always missed this kind of funding opportunities because I was not eligible. So that was a bummer, but I liked doing it, so I kept doing it. I also got a 1 year that I was eligible for 1 year for writing the thesis in a replacement grant for my other work. So I was back in university again, and I did my PhD at the end of the 1990s.
Can I ask, how did you, how'd you get interested in LSD? I mean, you were interested in the MDMA scene and all that, but like what led you to be interested in LSD as like a historical topic?
Well, I was always already interested in LSD, like many people from my generation, I guess. You read Alan Watts, you read Tom Wolfe, The Electrical Acid Test.
Yeah.
You were always wondering what it would be.
Uh-huh.
And then suddenly it comes around and you know that it was totally different than anything you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And interesting thing about being a historian, you start immediately reading on whatever is on the subject in your local library. So stuff by Hoffman, stuff by Leary, stuff on them. At that moment, of course, far less than is available now.
Yeah.
And I also contacted a lot of people who were involved in shaping the psychedelic movement of the 1960s, were involved in turning Amsterdam into a so-called magical center. So and it was very easy for me to approach these people, to get into contact with these people, because Amsterdam is not that big a city, and this whole subculture knew each other. And then they also knew like doctors involved, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So actually it was very interesting for me to start both a study of the documents in the archives as to do an oral history of people involved at that time.
So can you describe, are there, I presume the first wave, like everywhere, is in the 60s, and then does it kind of die out again and then come back in the 90s, or is it just around after that? I mean, when did you first encounter LSD?
Like as a material object?
Yeah.
I think it was already around in the 1980s, and then often in the form of small pyramids, later it became the papers, the paper trips. So the first phase would have been, well, actually starts in, you can say 1959, when a Dutch psychiatrist starts to do experiments on healthy subjects. He wanted to investigate the psychopathology of LSD. And a lot of these people were people like a Dutch writer and poet called Vinkenoog, who's well known in the Netherlands, but he wrote in Dutch, but he was totally connected with the whole international Allen Ginsberg, beat poets, even people from the former situationist international, like Alexander Trocky. So all these people knew each other. So there starts to exist a group of beatnik poets and writers in Amsterdam, often located around the Leidseplein, so not far from the Stedelijk Museum you visited today. And they also started to introduce the idea of the happening in Amsterdam. That was also well known in the United States, I guess.
Yep.
But for instance, what became famous in the Netherlands was what these writers and poets did. They held right in the center of Amsterdam on the Spui, Atheneum bookstore you visited probably. That's where that was. So they did these happenings on Saturday evening, in which they wanted to expose consumer society, because there's also a statue there which was given to the city of Amsterdam by a tobacco company. So, and at a certain moment, other young people came and joined, and these are the famous Provos. So these young anarchists, some intellectuals, some from a working class background, often dressed in white jeans, who protested against the consumer society. And then there became a kind of overlap between the psychedelic movement and this nascent Provo group.
All right.
Although there was some discussion whether or not you should take LSD, or whether this was another opium for the masses. And the same discussions you had in the United States and the underground. So then it starts to explode from there, especially after LSD becomes illegal in 1966. You have the whole famous phenomenon, which from point of view of today also really contributes to Amsterdam as a center of drug tourism. You have a lot of hippie young people, also for other countries coming here, sit on Dam Square, sit in the Vondelpark. The Dutch police and justice at a certain point decides, okay, let's be sensible. We do not crack down on individual users of marijuana and hashish. One, because that's fruitless, because they're too much anyway. Two, there are more stricter problems like the upcoming heroin epidemic. And three, because a lot of politicians were afraid that they would alienate their own kids, because these hippies happen to be middle class, etc.
Taking drugs, So, what is this, like 1976? What year is this? When they...
This results in 1976 in the famous change in the opium laws, which actually only says that the punishments for producing, distributing, and possessing cannabis are less than those from the so-called high drugs. But concomitant with that, there were rules that small amounts of cannabis in your possession would be tolerated, so you would not be prosecuted. So this is not actually in the law, so strictly speaking, it's illegal. But since then, no individual user has ever been arrested or harassed. So this contributed to the idea of Amsterdam and the Netherlands as a kind of drugs paradise, So together with kind of tolerant atmosphere, from that day you also see an increasing drug tourism to the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole psychedelic movement actually already dies out a little bit in the early 1970s, like everywhere else, because it kind of fails to make true to its promises. So it's the cycle of hope. Everything's going to be changed, and then things don't change. A lot of LSD users couldn't cope with their vision, so they turned to heroin with all the problems of that. So you can say this first wave of enthusiasm is like the decade of the 1960s, maybe early 1970s. But it gives, it did put the germs in for some continuing developments. For instance, there is a small village to the north of Amsterdam called Ruigoord. And this was squatted in the early 1970s by hippies. And since then, and it still is kind of a center for a continuing psychedelic movement without the impact of the 1960s or the hope. So, and there's also a guy from the Netherlands called Bart Huges, who was not so influential in the Netherlands, but seems to have had huge influence, especially in the UK, for his idea of the third eye. The third eye is that you drill a hole in your skull, and that makes you, that lifts out the pressure on your skull, and that gets you permanent high in the range of 1/3 of an LSD trip. And a lot of people did this, and actually one of his English followers is still one of the biggest financiers of psychedelic medical research today. So
they really drill a hole in their head.
They really or they think they drilled. So he drilled a hole in his head, but he was brought to the hospital. They made an X-ray, and the doctor said he actually didn't succeed in really, because it seems not to be so easy to drill a hole in your head, especially if you do it yourself. Self-trepanation. Others say he did it again later and he succeeded. Yeah. So that really contributed to the idea that if you take drugs, you must have a hole in your head.
Yeah. Quite literally, yeah.
So that was that. The stuff played around in the 1980s, but the 1980s were a more grittier atmosphere. Actually, I think most underground people more likely were to take amphetamines or heroin if they went the whole way. But then just in other countries, there was the emergence of the MDMA house phenomenon at the end of the 1980s. And this is really interesting. I think for us as drug historians, that this all seems to be, it goes in fashions. And we're not really able to explain them.
Yeah.
We can give all kind of courses, but it's still really a mystery why at one point nothing is as cool as going into the mud, get yourself addicted on heroin, piss off your parents, and live in squats. And then a year later, this is totally passé. You're seen as a loser by everyone, and the cool thing is to have bright clothes, flowers again, and dance.
Yeah.
And so there's an amusing story. I knew one guy who lived in a squat. He was a pain in the ass of everyone. I heard he went to Berlin, and some women from the squatting movement there threw him into the river because of his behavior. But then MDMA started, and he suddenly said you encountered him with flowers in his hair and a guitar. That's what drugs do to you, I guess. So that's the new.
And that's when you got interested in just beginning.
Well, that was my generation.
Yeah.
So and you saw it And it happened. You went to discos, and the music changed from one moment to the next. Suddenly, it was all dance music that the year before would have been discredited as disco. And disco is, of course, a bourgeois commercial something for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But now there was dance music. So that is, I think, the second start. And you saw also people getting more interested. Also, again, in therapeutic inventions. And then that kind of died out again. I mean, the dance music continued, of course. But the whole vibe of the early 90s disappeared a little bit. Mm-hmm. It did make the Netherlands the biggest producer of MDMA in the world. That was a plus for some people.
Yeah.
So, and then you got this third... Well, and then you got people now talk about the psychedelic renaissance.
Right.
What do they mean? So they encountered for the first time, and it's getting respectability in academic circles. But I don't see especially an explosion of use of psychedelics in society in a way that the 60s or the house scene had. I mean, in the Netherlands, of course, lots of people use drugs. It's easy to get by.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to have a countercultural vibe. And while medical research has gotten more attention, it was never really discontinued. But then again, when I did my PhD, LSD was a subject from the past. It was, well, if I would have done it now, I would be actually heralding the future. Mm-hmm. A psychedelic humanities guy doing stuff on LSD. So that's a very strange development. And I think since 2010, there has been, but maybe we should talk about this later. The most interesting thing I see actually is that there's a professionalization of psychedelic therapy. And it's both in psychiatry. Mm-hmm. It's commercial with the development of things like the MDMA AT therapy by MAPS and others. Mm-hmm. It's also more in a gray circuit of ayahuasca sessions, ibogaine, strictly illegal, but straddling some borderlines.
Sure, ketamine, all these things, right?
Yeah.
It's also now it's like a more of a performance-enhancing drug, right? As opposed to the countercultural moment when it's seen as a way of breaking free from the mainstream. And right? And now it's like the therapy is so that you can get used to remaining in the mainstream, or you're microdosing so that you're really good at work. Yeah. And that's a very different kind of orientation.
Yeah. And that's, of course, interesting because it exemplifies that people are not on islands. They take their cues from the social and economic setting. Mm-hmm. And, we get provocative. We could say this so-called this so-called psychedelic renaissance is affect the neoliberalization of psychedelics. Make it into a performance-enhancing drugs, making people, and that is stressed again and again, making people perform better in society. Although you could say, that's the problem, that they have to do these performances.
Right.
And then there is, of course, the struggle: who owns them? So, should it be owned by the therapists, the psychiatrists? Should it be in the hands of all? Well, that's a democratic perspective, which is suspect. And how it even goes to how do we call them? So the proponents of psychedelic therapy would never speak of ecstasy instead of MDMA. You have ecstasy, the street drug. Yeah. And MDMA is the responsible drug used by responsible people. So they really want to separate the discussions about their use in society. You have the medical domain, and you have the other domain, which is the field of criminologists, police officers, etc., etc. So they installed in the Netherlands a state committee for the legalization of MDMA. I was a witness of that. And then they said MDMA AT therapy is good, so that should be supported. But every support or even the idea that MDMA use is normalized or regularly in society should be discounted because it only supports organized crime. That's the big boogie bear, of course, organized crime. So you see, that's an interesting example, I think, of a professionalization process. And again, a group of people who say, okay, give this MDMA to us. Yeah. We do good things with it. And don't give it to others because then...
right.
Don't give it to Al Capone.
Right. It's like the late 19th century. Give it to the doctors. And so when did I have two questions about the cannabis toleration and then the smart shops. So the smart shops, for the listeners, if you've never been to Amsterdam, are places where you can buy psychedelics, or you're kind of saying maybe kind of. I mean, we were walking by them and they sell these chocolate bars. And they sell, I don't know, they had all sorts of things on offer. When do those date? So the cannabis tolerance dates in 1976. When did the smart shops start to appear?
Yeah, they're actually the descendants of the head shops. The head shops, that's also already a phenomenon in the Haight-Ashbury in 67. Yeah. And they, at a very early stage, like the 1970s, they already were in Amsterdam, and you could buy all kinds of paraphernalia, all kinds of products which were strictly not... which were not illegal, but it kind of looks like a psychedelic. They are already around in the 1970s. And then later in the 1990s, they had a specific boost, especially one smart shop here in Amsterdam called Conscious Dreams. Because apart from selling, energy drinks, love potions, all kinds of stuff which is not illegal, but there's a certain vibe. They also started to sell psilocybe cubensis, kaalkopjes in Dutch, so the small psilocybin-containing mushrooms, which can be found in Dutch fields, but which they actually now cultivated themselves, and which were at that time not illegal yet. And this gave a big boost to the smart shop phenomenon. On Friday at night, you could go to the Conscious Dreams. That was around the corner of the Leidsestraat, close to the Leidseplein. And up until the corner, there were people standing in line to buy mushrooms. And not freaks, not hippies, people who have worked all week and now wanted to enjoy... take it in company dinners, whatever. Right. So at a certain moment, these mushrooms were illegalized. They found some replacements, like the so-called truffles, who are not illegal yet.
I was wondering about that. What are the truffles?
Yeah, that's a small mushroom which has not the impact of... I guess that depends also on your mood and expectations. Right. There are a lot of stories about tourists jumping out of windows because they ate truffles. Anyway, since then, these smart shops are around. You have their commercial tricks, of course. Actually, I think most of the things they actually sell are not illegal at all. They get names like MDMA, suggesting that it is... stuff like that.
But it's not MDMA?
No.
Okay.
unless they have something under the counter. But I think they would be quite stupid to put it in the front of their shop. So that's
do they get inspected? I mean, do they?
Well, they have to be in accordance with what we call the warenautoriteit. So that's the officers who go about restaurants, food safety, and they have to accord with these rules.
Okay.
I don't think the police is very interested in them.
Yeah.
Police is more interested in the coffee shops.
Yeah. Which is where you get cannabis.
Yeah, but whose status is controversial for a lot of reasons. And also, in some municipalities, they have actually been raided again. People gone to jail, etc., etc.
The coffee shops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can get the real stuff there. Yeah.
So can you? So I'm interested in this kind of Dutch, the Dutch thinking about this, or if we can talk about a kind of Dutch ideology playing into the coffee shop phenomenon. This idea that, well, this is very pragmatic. This is going to happen anyway. We're not going to condone it, but we're going to tolerate it. What are the roots of that? And also the fact that this is, obviously highly controversial from an international perspective, and Dutch neighbors don't like it, and so forth. Can you explain that a little more? I don't know. How might we better understand this thinking that led to these coffee shops and their survival over 3 decades, 4 decades?
Yeah, I think thinking is maybe too large a word.
Yeah.
It's not that this is the outcome of a specific ideology. It is also diversified over the country. So you must realize that only 1/3 of the Dutch municipalities have coffee shops. 1/3 of all coffee shops are actually in Amsterdam. There is some diversification. But why didn't they raid them in the first place?
Yeah.
So already in the 1960s, you see the phenomenon that, and I think in other countries they would have similar policies, but that you tolerate the retail of illegal substances in places which are not in public, not in the streets, and which do not give harassment in forms of crime, other dealings, fencing.
Yeah, a nuisance is what it'd be called.
Nuisance.
Yeah.
So you want is what criminologists call a kind of co-management. Instead of something like zero tolerance, which even the police realizes never can work.
Yeah.
Or especially the police, I would say.
Yeah.
So in the 1960s, you also see like places like the Paradiso, which was a pop center, and the Melkweg, the Milky Way, another pop center, both close to the Leidseplein again. They have their own house dealers.
So when you say pop center, like a music venue. Okay.
Music venues.
Yeah.
They have their own house dealers.
Yeah.
And they are tolerated by the police.
Oh.
They don't invade these music venues, etc., etc., for a number of reasons. One, because they don't give any further nuisance, and second, because Amsterdam has this idea of the psychedelic movement is actually in a lot of ways socially linked to the rest of the city, to politicians, to artists, to the cultural elite. In a certain sense, part of the cultural elite is also part of the psychedelic movement. So we're not talking about the heroin epidemic and people robbing you in the streets. This is inside. This is reasonably clean. Okay, the police doesn't like hippies, but they have other things to do. And then there were some people who created the first coffee shops. And actually the police didn't like them at first. For instance, in Amsterdam in the 1980s, you have a lot of raids. And why did they like it? Well, it was after all out of their control, and the police doesn't like that too much.
Yeah.
But then at a certain moment, they came to an understanding with the coffee shops. So if they would take care that there is no fencing of stolen goods on the properties, no dealing in so-called hard drugs, if they don't advertise too loudly, if there's no noise that disturbs the neighbors, then we will tolerate you. And this is how it worked. And in the 1970s, you have still stories of, okay, we have the policy of tolerance. So I am allowed to have, 30 grams of cannabis in my possession. But I'm running a coffee shop. How much cannabis do I sell? I can't have it on my premises because if the police raids, I'm busted.
Yeah.
So they left it in their car in a back alley, and every now and then someone would go out and get a new kind of
another
cargo of
30 grams.
cannabis. So that still happens a lot in the 1970s. But in the course of the 1980s, there is this co-management, there is this tolerance, and there's also, I think, what this is also connected to is that already from, say, 1980s, cannabis loses its image as a countercultural drug. So it's not only just hippies and people with long hair who smoke it.
Yeah.
So actually the hippies and the long-haired, they complain that everybody's smoking it. Even people with short hair and a job. so that's uncool. So that's, I think, what happened to the coffee shops. But then the interesting phenomenon, the production side is unregulated. And from 1986, 1987, police officers start to feel uncomfortable and think that the supply side is controlled by criminals, which it has been all that time, of course, which makes sense if you criminalize something.
Yeah.
But they really started to get worried. So the whole idea of neighbor countries that the Netherlands do nothing about the supply side is totally untrue. And then also the same people who devised the first coffee shops also brought over from the United States the technology for home-growing cannabis. So the Dutch also became, in the homegrown field, one of the biggest producers in Europe and the world.
Is this in the 90s? Because I think it
this
kind
is
of
around 1990.
Yeah, it takes off in the US in like the late 80s.
Yeah. And so they bought these celebratory figures from the US, like Old Ed or whatever.
Ed Rosenthal. Ed Rosenthal.
They brought them over, and Americans love the Netherlands, of course, because that idea, it is all legal here.
Yeah.
You have the Cannabis Cup events in Amsterdam. They're kind of networking.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm not sure how everyone remembers anything if they're continually stoned.
I once went to a party at Rosenthal's house.
Okay.
It was a benefit for a couple who had been arrested under... So this is before California legalized recreational cannabis. They had medical marijuana, and a couple had been arrested, actually had had their child taken away by Child Protective Services because there had been cannabis in the house, even though they were licensed medical marijuana patients. And so Ed and his wife had a benefit at his house. This was right after my book had come out, and I had done an event with Ed at the Amsterdam University. And so it was great because, of course, as a teenager, I would see these Ask Ed columns in High Times, right? And I'm at Ed Rosenthal's house. And everybody was super stoned. And what made me think of it was that you said, I don't know how you remember anything. It was like, it was a very awkward conversation because everybody was just so damn stoned. And it wasn't that entertaining in the end. But it was a lovely party, and they were super nice and super generous hosts. But anyway, so this is in the early 90s. Ed Rosenthal comes over, other people. They start teaching hydroponic growing techniques, presumably, and everything else. And then the cultivation takes off.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you have the tolerance of the coffee shops, which is kind of co-management kind of thing. Also, because these coffee shops, they're very different. There were feminist coffee shops, there were tourist coffee shops, there were working class coffee shops. But on the other hand, you have the increase in the illegal production, the smuggling, import, export, transit, and so forth. You see around 20 years ago that in certain cities, coffee shops again get raided. People get arrested, especially if they're very big. There was a big one in Terneuzen, that's in the south of Holland, where a lot of people from Germany, from Belgium, came to buy their stuff. And not only did they arrest the owner and his employees, but they used like these new laws about organized crime. You've said coffee, so you're a member of an organized crime ring to really put them under pressure. So that is the other hand. So today you have still majors asking to close their coffee shops or not allowing tourists go to coffee shops. You have this experiment at the moment with coffee shops that only sell legally produced cannabis, which seems to be a rather failure because it doesn't take into account that cannabis users are in a way connoisseurs. So you don't smoke everything, and some people like to smoke hashish. You only can get that from abroad. So that doesn't seem to be real successful.
What would be legal production? I thought all of the production was illegal.
A company has a license of the state to produce it.
Okay.
So the same like medicinal cannabis.
Yeah.
Medicinal cannabis is rather a strange thing. We did a survey a few years ago, and it seems like 1/3 of the respondents in the survey actually used cannabis for self-medication, pains, sores, etc., etc. And of course, there's no doubt that it works because it's also an analgesic. But this is strictly speaking not medicinal cannabis because they just bought it in the coffee shop and didn't get it on a recipe of their doctor.
Yeah.
So the medicinal cannabis is this. Is not to be smoked, but is this stuff which you get in all kinds of packages, which is produced by a licensed firm, but it's still strictly illegal to use this cannabis from the coffee shops, although you know it works.
Yeah.
That's not medicinal cannabis.
It's probably cheaper too, I would guess.
Definitely, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So how does this all relate to the prostitution phenomenon, the red light phenomenon? Is there any relationship? Is it the same kind of thinking? Like, since when has the red light district existed?
I guess always.
Always?
The red light district is right in the heart of the center, and it's right in what used to be one of the biggest ports in the world. So
sure.
You would actually walk into the sea almost. And I guess a lot of drunk sailors did. So, and there would be sex workers catering for the demand.
Of course.
Actually, we know that there was.
Yeah.
So, in my memory, and I was born in Amsterdam, there was always some kind of red light district, or what we call it, the Rosse buurt, which is like the the red neighborhood, like in Amsterdam, like in Rotterdam, like in Hamburg, like in London.
Yeah.
I think the point now is, of course, that it's not catering for sailors or for locals, because you have other places here where there is window prostitution, other places around town. But the red light district is now this combination of window prostitution, coffee shops, which are not catering to people living in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Cheap booze,
Gambling.
Yep. Tourist shops, and a infrastructure that obviously brings a lot of people from abroad.
Yeah.
And drops them there.
Sure.
So how is this related to the coffee shop phenomenon? I don't know. I don't even know if it's essential, but maybe it contributes to the marketing of the place.
Is the prostitution legal? It's not just tolerated?
It has become legal, yeah.
It has
it's
become legal.
Now it's legal.
Okay.
Which actually has created a problem that a lot of these sex workers are exploited, but there's no legal basis to protect them anymore. When they were illegal, you could take steps against their employers, so not the clients, but because he did something illegal. But that's not illegal anymore. So actually for the sex work is not necessarily an improvement.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
So
when did it become legal? Do you know?
Yeah, somewhere over the last decades. I don't know the exact year.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. All right. So you finish your dissertation. Did you get a job right away now you're at Utrecht University. Did you start there?
No. I got a job at Free University in Amsterdam, which shows you how funny things were. Because I had written this book on LSD, I suddenly was into the field of medical history. And medical history was then a upcoming thing. There was the Wellcome Trust in England actually finance or said to finance also research in the Netherlands. So my supervisors also said, okay, you have to emphasize the medical, so the psychiatry and the Bastiaan's work, etc. So suddenly I was a medical historian, to my surprise. And at the Free University Amsterdam, you have at that time you still had a section on the history, philosophy, sociology of medicine. It was in the medical faculty. And I started to do things for them and did some research projects with them until they reorganized and cut away the whole history thing around 2010 because it didn't fit in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So
then I had to find new research projects, and I started working first at Utrecht Medical Center and now at the Faculty of Science. So I actually have never worked in a humanities department in my life. Only at medical faculties, science faculties, which is a very different ball game. You have very different colleagues, very different culture of publication, very different, and I would even say different kinds of people. And up until a few years ago, it all was, as for most of us, getting funding.
Yeah.
So kind of struggled on and kept on trucking.
And so, when do you go to Utrecht? In 2011? 11?
Yeah,
okay.
I think, yeah.
And so now you're a regular faculty there. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which means you have to teach a lot.
Yeah. How much do you teach?
What?
How much do you have to teach?
Half of your time.
So what does that mean? Like how many classes a year?
It's all negotiable, but it's like 3 courses a year.
Oh.
And some more stuff.
Oh, that's not bad.
It's
I teach 4.
doable.
Yeah.
It's doable.
In the U.S., the standard is basically if you teach 4 or fewer classes, it's a good job. 2, as we say, 2 classes a semester.
Well, it depends also on finances.
Yeah.
So we're now in bad weather. The budget cuts by the government. 10% of all the money is taken from the universities. So there's more pressure on you both to do more teaching because there's less staff.
Yeah.
And to get more funding for research because there's less funding.
Right.
So...
yeah, similar story. All right, so you ended up writing this great book on the history of drug smuggling in the Netherlands, Drug Smuggler Nation. Are the roots of the organized crime that is involved with cannabis production, for example, or MDMA production today, that kind of thing? Is there kind of a clear line of development from, a century ago, that kind of thing?
Yes, obviously. So one of the things what I wanted to do in the book is trace these genealogies, not so much in the sense of creating this idea of mafia or Camorro like Cosa Nostra, sinister sects that thrive through the ages, but more to show, okay, this is a culture of smuggling, which at a certain point takes up drug smuggling because it's one of the easiest and the most profitable.
Yeah.
And to historicize the culture. So both in terms of what are the social relationships between these people, between the next generations, but also what are the cultural symbols, etc., in which they organize. So the traces are both for the, I would say, indigenous Dutch people. So that was very easy. You can trace a direct lineage from the smugglers of the interwar period, getting into amphetamine smuggling and now MDMA production. So, for instance, 2 of the biggest, or must I say notorious, MDMA traffickers at this moment were both part of a famous gang of burglars from the 60s, led by one who was known as the Robin Hood of the South. But to be a successful burglar or safe cracker or bank robber, you need actually a lot of skills, far more than you needed just to traffic drugs.
Sure.
So that was one that was kind of known already, or it was postulated as such. But I wanted to see what are the real clues. So that was quite nice, and also quite nice that lately I was contacted by the grandson of this Robin Hood of the South.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about what he knew of his granddad and stuff like this. So that was really fun. But also the connections with the in the so-called Chinese underground and so-called secret societies.
Yeah.
And how this works, and that is more like a social network than a real Fu Manchu kind of secret society thing.
Yeah.
And that it helps if you're part of this society, and that there was a clear link to be laid between the opium smuggling of the 1920s and the heroin smugglers of the 1970s. So that was also quite nice.
Yeah.
And also here in Amsterdam, the influence of the local underworld. So once again, we are not very far from where Frits van der Wereld grew up, who was after the war, a notorious cigarette smuggler who turned to cannabis and was one of the first one to send his ships into the Mediterranean and to Lebanon to bring back hashish. And he was actually the teacher of other famous figures who lately expanded the trade. So you could say, okay, these are very clear lineages, all very informal actually. And that as a cultural historian, I was very interested in what are then the cultural conditions for this environment. So at what point do you partake of this environment? Well, because one of the interesting things in doing this research, I had this discussion at a certain point when I was preparing an exhibition in Rotterdam. So how do you become a drug smuggler?
Yeah.
You could say it's easy. You go to Bogota, you're bound to find someone who likes to sell you some cocaine, and you bring it back.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy. You have to have some kind of, well, to start with, you have to have the right personality to do that.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting to explore what do you need? And then, for instance, that in this Dutch underworld, most of the people were involved in these networks had kind of also a background in a criminal world. So they came from neighborhoods with some criminal backgrounds, and not necessarily everybody is a criminal, but
sure.
where people take some do not necessarily obey the law. But one of the biggest of these guys, Klaas Bruinsma, he actually did not come from such a neighborhood at all. He came from his father was a factory owner, and he came from a place which in the middle of the Netherlands, which is actually very high class. Only he was part of, I say, 1960s youth protests. So a lot of these early smugglers also came from that cultural environment.
Yes.
And then the interesting is how can such a man as Bruinsma, who was actually distrusted by most of the criminals because he talked very polite and also always wore a suit.
Real
How can
business
such a figure then become such a big man in that world?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting stuff to research.
Yeah. What kind of reputation does the world of organized crime have here? I mean, I know that you said earlier it's kind of the bugaboo, the organized crime. You know, in Mexico, it has a reputation of being very violent, very unpredictable, not romanticized, really. I mean, I suppose romanticized by some young people, for sure.
Yeah.
In the U.S., there's kind of a romanticization of, the Italian mafia and all that stuff. What's the, what's kind of the idea here in the Netherlands? What do people think of when they think of organized crime?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, what is organized crime?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of romanticization, you have like for instance, in the south of this city, in the Bijlmer, people from some ethnic backgrounds, often black Surinamese, who like hip-hop.
Uh-huh.
So you have this particular ultra-violent form of hip-hop, which is kind of popular with them also.
Uh-huh.
And they like to use the image and also behave like that. And we think, but we're not sure that is a place where you would recruit, for instance, the people who take the cocaine out of the containers in the harbor and bring it away. So on the lower rings of the supply chain. But in general, organized crime is viewed the same way as I think in the US or in Mexico. So it's an abomination. I think that it has also been, but the discourse is now also it actually threatens society. So there's a lot of fear here that organized crime is taking over society. And the police's word about this, although it's also in their advantage because they need more resources to combat it, academics worry about it. You can say the same thing. It also gives them funding. Actually, I myself have been given funding because of this.
Yeah.
The news is full of so-called drug lords. So the latest of them is a Dutchman who is in Sierra Leone, seems to have an affair with the daughter of the president.
Oh, really?
Is actually convicted in the Netherlands, and there's a lot of, and seems to be doing some cocaine trafficking from there, from West Africa. But tomorrow there will be another.
Right.
There were some shootings from one famous journalist, for instance. He was shot dead. And the fingers are pointed at another famous drug lord. It's not proven, by the way, that he actually was involved in this. So there's this really... and sometimes mayors in municipalities are threatened.
Yeah.
So there's this really fear of organized crime taking over, having, for instance, in this neighborhood, secret laboratories... where cocaine is washed out of clothes, the stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
I think that's on very much on top of the political agenda also.
Oh, really?
And there was also some fear that the Mexicans had come over, and will take over this country because there was some Mexicans spotted who brought some technology about methamphetamine production. So it was the Mexican cartels are here.
Yeah.
That turned out not to be such decisive the case as it was presented. There's a journalist who wrote a very good book about it. But the next scare is around the corner.
Sure, of course.
Like everywhere.
Yes. All right, so maybe the last question. The other night we were having beers in Nijmegen. And you said that the illegal market's working pretty well. That was kind of what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I give some context to this conversation. There's a polarized debate in the Netherlands. One says you have to crack harder down on drugs, organized crime, but also on individual consumption, because every line of coke you take finances a killing in Colombia. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So we have to crack down on drugs because of organized crime. Then there's the other one, represented, for instance, by the mayor of Amsterdam, who wants to do legal MDMA and cocaine experiments. And he says we have to liberalize policies. And why? Because of organized crime.
Yeah.
Because then we take away from organized crime the way to make big shots of money.
Yeah.
But let's talk about it. We are historians. Let's talk about it from a more economic perspective or a consumer perspective. And you see, that's my thesis, that the growth of the illegal drug market since 1960s is demand-driven. It's not that people had to be pushed into using these drugs. They wanted these drugs, and criminals are good in having provided them.
Yeah.
Logically. Now, in most countries, these illegal markets have all kinds of problems in functioning, quality, ways of retail, ways of production. But actually in the Netherlands, from a consumer point of view, where you can get, for instance, very pure MDMA for a very low price from dealers who you know and who will be interested in keeping their clients, who make enough money not to necessarily have to divorce to methods as giving them less quality, etc., etc. So in this country, you can get anything you want for reasonable prices. You don't need anymore to go at night to some dark spot waiting for your man. They will bring it to you by a scooter courier. These people are always very polite. There is not much problem in the sense of casualties other than a legal market would have. So from this perspective, the system works very well. Only there is a lot of concomitant problems. For instance, the police has cracked down on the supply rings. And one of the things they do is to get infiltrators in these groups. So violence, there's one thesis is that violence has grown in organized crime because the police had more informants in these groups. Because what do you do with an informant?
Yep.
The same with the chemical waste problem. It used to be that everybody could just bring their chemical waste and no questions were asked. Now the police has taken care that questions are asked, so people are dumping the chemical waste of production in nature. So there is this paradox of increasing surveillance. Also, like at the airports, in the harbors, the more you increase surveillance, the more it pays to help organized crime.
Sure. Right.
So there's this whole paradox of surveillance, which actually raises the problems of this illegal market. But if you would just take it away, if you just would leave it alone. So for instance, cocaine would flow through the harbor. Nobody will be looking at it. Nobody will actually see it because you're not looking at it. It disappears again over the borders because most of it is transit. Paradoxically, you would have a lot less problems than you will have by trying to regulate it all.
Yeah.
So that was more or less my provocative thesis. But I think there is some... Yeah, I mean, there's some truth in it, and it shows how this subject we like so much, this drug subject, is such an irrational subject in society. How drugs are so framed in all kinds of ways that it's very hard to get a more rational discussion about it.
Yeah. So there's no fentanyl problem here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But we... the idea is that because of the Dutch health system. So in America, the health system actually stimulated the rise of this illegal market in opioids.
Okay.
Yeah. But in Holland, everybody is insured. So there's no way that, for instance, patients will need to resort to illegal markets to get like morphine or oxycodone, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So we think that is one of the reasons why there's no, or not yet, a fentanyl problem.
Huh. Interesting. Well, cool, man. Anything else? Anything we didn't cover?
Well, lots of things. But, you can't use them all. Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good?
Good conversation.
All right. Cool, man. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right, there you go. Pretty good. Pretty good, right? Didn't I sound like shit? Sounded terrible. It sounded like shit in that interview. If you made it this far, though, I guess it wasn't so bad that it made you turn it off. So that's good. But yeah, I felt like crap. I think as soon as we finished... Did I mention this at the start? I don't think so. As soon as we finished, I took a gigantic nap. And I was sick for several more days. I didn't start to feel better until we got to London a few days later. So... but I made it happen. I'm a hero for making that happen. No, I'm not a hero. I just really wanted to interview Stefan because he's really interesting, and I'm really interested. I learned a lot. I'm really interested in the history of drugs in the Netherlands, and I learned a lot of stuff from him on that day, and I hope you did too. As always, share, like, subscribe, and I hope everything's going great in your world. I know things are a little wacky out there, but hopefully at home you can relax sometimes. Mellow out. Just mellow out. All right, that's it. We'll be back in about a month with another interview, that one from London, where I still sound sick. Maybe even worse. I don't know. We'll see. But I hope you're looking forward to that one. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you stay well, stay safe, all that stuff, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.